The press and politicians have a sometimes healthy, sometimes unhealthy check and balance. But when you can get beyond that and see a friendship develop, as it did between Larry Haws and Kristi Marohn from the St. Cloud Times, it's very refreshing. And please welcome this wonderful woman, Kristi Marohn.
Thank you. I was very honored when Kelly asked me to speak. I first met Larry in 1998 when I was a young, very green reporter starting at the St. Cloud Times. And Larry was running for county commissioner that year. And from my perspective in the newsroom, it was a very interesting campaign to watch. We kept getting letters to the editor from probably a lot of you, people who knew Larry as a park director or a coach or a teacher or a friend. And these letters kept coming and coming and coming, and they wouldn't stop coming. And there was one in particular that I remember. It came probably about 2 weeks before the election. And a woman wrote that her elderly mother she was in a car that they had stopped near Lake George. Some of you maybe remember this letter and this story. The driver stepped out for a few minutes and left the car in gear, and the car began to roll into the lake. And the woman didn't know how to swim, so she was just sitting in the car praying the rosary. And Larry happened to be nearby and jumped into the lake, got the car open, pulled this woman out, pulled her to shore. And I remember reading this letter thinking, who is this guy? And how would you beat him in an election? So as it turned out, you couldn't beat him, and Larry won the election. And since I covered the county board, we sort of struck up a friendship, which typically involved having coffee on Friday afternoons at one of the coffee shops. And Larry would kind of tell me what was going on behind the scenes in local government. But just as often, he would tell me about people that he thought we should write stories about. And these weren't famous or important people. They were people Larry had met along the way. Maybe a 90-year-old woman who still won ribbons every year at the Bend County Fair, or an immigrant who was making a new life for himself here, for his family. And what struck me about these coffee chats that we would have is how often we were interrupted by people who wanted to stop just to say hello to Larry. And sometimes it would be a former mayor or maybe a city council or city official, but just as often it was a homeless veteran or a woman with disabilities, people that Larry had helped somewhere along the way, and they remembered it. He always had time for you, no matter whether you were important or not. During election years, I would get to hear stories about Larry on the campaign trail, which were always interesting. I was always amazed that even during elections when he was expected to win by a lopsided margin, he would spend long days out walking the streets, knocking on doors, talking to his constituents. He would even knock on the doors of people that he knew hadn't voted for him. I think he thought that if he could just get his foot in the door, shake their hand, maybe talk to them for a few minutes, he would change their mind. And in his emails to me, Larry would often quote the final lines of the book Charlotte's Web. You remember the story? Who was befriended by Charlotte, even though he didn't do much to deserve it. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way, because that's just how Larry lived his life. So I thought it would be fitting to read a little bit more from Charlotte. Why did you do all this for me? Wilbur asked. I don't deserve it. I've never done anything for you. You have been my friend, replied Charlotte. That in itself is a tremendous thing. I wove my webs for you because I liked you. After all, what's a life anyway? We're born, we live a little while, we die. By helping you, perhaps I was trying to lift up my life a trifle. Heaven knows anyone's life can stand a little of that. Thank you, Larry and your family, for your friendship.
Thank you, Kristi. Thank you all.